I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Carson City Airport Authority for Wednesday, September 17th at 6 p.m. Let the record show we're meeting in the Sierra Room of the Carson City Community Center. Can I have a roll call, please?
Chairperson Williams.
Present.
Vice Chairperson Hutter.
Present.
Member Griffin. Member Fawcett. Member Sharp. Here. Member Stotts. Member White.
Here.
The quorum is present.
Thank you. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item.
I'll mention it. I noticed in the minutes Mr. Takis sent a note around that we have to remember to keep hitting the mic button so that the recorders in the back can hear us whether there are public members present or not. Approval of the minutes of past meetings of the Airport Authority. We have the minutes from Thursday, August 20th, 2014 at 6 p.m. Do any members of the board have comments, additions, or corrections?
Mr. Chair, I made a mistake. It should be Wednesday.
It should be Wednesday. Okay. I'll make a note on the copy. Please do the same on the signed copy. Okay, so it's for the meeting that occurred Wednesday, August 20th, 2014. If there are no additions or corrections beyond that one, we would stand. If there are any other comments from members of the public? Seeing none, we would stand in need of a motion for approval.
So moved.
We have a motion. Need a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second for the meeting approval of the minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, if there be any? The motion carries unanimously. The minutes are approved. Modification of the agenda. The chairman reserves the right to modify the agenda in order to most effectively process agenda items. I see no need for any modification this evening. Public comment. Members of the public who wish to address the Airport Authority may speak on agendized and non-agendized matters related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person or topic. If your item requires extended discussion, please request the chairman to calendar the matter for a future Airport Authority meeting. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. Consent agenda. We have nothing on consent for the evening. That would bring us to public hearings. Item G, first public hearing, discussion and possible action on items related to Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 of the Carson City Airport Main Apron Reconstruction Projects, FAA AIP number 3-32-0004-25, 3. I'm going to skip, if anybody doesn't mind, the reading of all the numbers, including monthly status reports, potential changes to the work or work schedule, construction change orders, and other related items. Mr. Clegg and Mr. Rowe.
Okay, well, I'll give you an update. This is an action item. We've got 2 change orders associated with the project that we need to act on. But Phase 1 is complete. We haven't done a final inspection, but as far as I know, the only work left to do was to fog seal and stripe, and that has been done. On Phase 2, Phase 2A has been fog sealed and striped, and that was the remaining work for that. And then Phase 2B and Phase 3 are still remaining to be complete. But on Phase 1, we have change order number 2 to close out the project. We like to balance out quantities and zero them out at the end of the project. And after balancing out the quantities for the final change order on Phase 1, it results in a reduction of $4,264 to the overall cost of the project. So I don't know if we should act on that one now or act on both of them together. What's your thought, Steve? Okay. So on Phase 2, we also have a balancing change order to close out the project, and that is the final change order, and that results in a reduction of $4,375.80 to the overall cost of that particular project. So, with that, the only remaining work other than the apron is the runway. They removed the numerals today, and they'll do a thorough cleaning tomorrow, spray GSB 88 on the runway, and then stripe it on Friday. So it should go well, and it should look beautiful when it's done. Any questions?
Could you just clarify what those two change order numbers are that you're requesting approval of?
Yeah, I'm requesting approval of change order number 2 for main apron reconstruction Phase 1, and approval of change order number 2 for main apron reconstruction Phase 2.
Okay. On the striping, are they going to remark the approach striping as well as the numerals to
Yes.
concur with that?
Yeah, what it'll do is the runway is going to get restriped to signify that it's a non-precision instrument approach so that it's consistent with approach procedures.
Any other questions for the engineer? Tim, any comments further?
As far as Phase 1 and Phase 2, like Jim was saying, they are complete. We had all of the aircraft over on Phase 2B and Phase 3. They have since been moved back to Phase 1 and Phase 2 areas. Now we'll start at 6 a.m. on the completion of the fog seal and restriping of Phase 2B and Phase 3. So by end of day tomorrow, we'll be finished with the south apron. And I'll talk about the runway here in a little while.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for either further discussion and/or a motion on this item. I'll try the motion. I move that we approve change order number 2 for Phase 1 for the balance as requested in the change order, and approve change order number 2 for Phase 2 with the same proviso for reduction of the balance per the change order specifications.
Second that?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, if there be any. Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. Item number 2, discussion and possible action to identify FAA-funded projects for 2015 and update the Airport Capital Improvement Program for fiscal years 2016 through 20. I assume that's Jim?
Okay, well, it's that time of year to develop the 2016 through 2020 Airport Capital Improvement Program. And so what I did was just took last year's ACIP and just simply shifted the projects up a year from what it was last year. Now, what happened this year was we were anticipating getting funding for the design for the North Apron reconstruction so that we could start actual construction next year, but that did not come through. And so The only grant that we'll be able to ask for, unless the FAA gives us more money, it would be the design for the North Apron. And then 2016 would be the first phase of that reconstruction. And 2017 would be the second phase, second and final phase of the reconstruction of that North Apron. And then what we had scheduled after those two projects was the airport master plan update, because at that time we would have reconstructed all projects identified in the previous master plan. So that's how the sequence of events goes. Then in 2019, we need to continue to do maintenance on the existing pavements. That includes the two parallel taxiways, to seal coat and stripe those. And then rehabilitate the perimeter road. What that would entail is an overlay for the majority of it, and then a reconstruction adjacent to the port-to-port hangars. And then in 2020, that is basically wish list stuff that came up from the airport authority members from last year, just items that they'd like to see incorporated into the ACIP so that we could pick and choose, or if some funding became available. I know that the Phoenix ADO is very interested in security, and that item to replace the automatic gates and the adjacent fence, that might have a higher priority to the Phoenix ADO than it did to the San Francisco ADO. They may just ask us to move that up, but it's there. We have a price associated with it, so we've identified the project cost so that when we go meet with the ADO, we'll have discussion items. So any questions or comments?
Any members of the board with questions for Jim? Morris?
I'd like to find a way to keep that master plan update to stay in 2017. I think if we look at that North Apron activity in 17, that's going to be a pretty light load in general, and we can see what the airport's going to look like at the end of that particular project. So if there's any way at all, we can get the FAA to start funding that master plan in 17. I'd like to leave master plan in 17.
If I could comment on that, while that's only a single item, it's a pretty big dollar item for the North Apron, and we do pretty well on funding. I don't know that we're going to be able to get that. We could try to move it forward. I'd ask Jim's opinion on that, but the North Apron is the thing that they've already told us they do. The master planning, we're not scheduled to do it until 18. We can move it forward if we need to, but I think there's several things that might have to happen prior to that. That's just a comment. That's not a recommendation either way. Jim, is it possible to leave it as a 17 item?
Actually, we could have two projects in 1 year. So what I could do is move the master plan up to be funded in the same year as the phase 2 of the North Apron.
Would that in any way negatively impact getting the balance of funding for the North Apron? Because that's in the last master plan.
No, I would think that the North Apron's got a higher priority in their minds. What I suspect would happen is they'd tell us to move it in at 2018. I'm talking about the master plan. But, the thing is at least we're trying to keep it in the same year that we had last year. We had programmed it for 2017. It just got shifted because we didn't get the design for the North Apron.
Right, I remember that, and so if we put it in 17 and we just can't make it swing, we still have the leisure of putting it back to 18, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And if history is any indication, the FAA, that's probably what the FAA will have us do. Typically, when we come in with more than one item or several items and the FAA is already looking at allocating funds, they will tell us, we want you to move this one back and that one back. So you're right, our fallback position would be this report. Now, if we move that up to 17, I guess my question is, should we try and move the perimeter wire fence up to 18 so that we at least have an item scheduled for 18? Particularly if you think Phoenix has a better appetite for security.
Yeah, I mean, that's an option. The other thing I was thinking about was splitting up those two projects in 2019, move one of them up into 18 and leave the other one in 19. I don't know. It's up to you guys. What you would prefer. The perimeter road gets light traffic. It's in pretty poor shape, but it gets relatively light traffic, so I don't anticipate it deteriorating any more, from one year to the next.
I would comment that I think if we're going to do anything, that we're going to move up to 18, I would make it the pavement seal for the taxiways,
Yeah.
because that would seem to me be a higher priority. After having spent all last week at the air races, I discovered that 90% of the roads at Stead Airport are dirt. So, and those are the perimeter roads that we use to access the center triangle of their airport.
Yeah.
So, the fact that we have any pavement at all on our perimeter road is I guess you would call it an airport luxury. So I would say if we're going to do anything, my recommendation would be if we're going to move the master plan up one, move the taxiways up one, and see what happens.
I guess it's worth asking the question, do we see any possibility of combining both of the phases of the North Apron in 2016? Or is that just a non-starter, whether from a likely funding standpoint or a project practicality standpoint?
As far as logistics go, in the reconstruction, it's going to be a problem anyway. But, which half do you pick? We have an exhibit that shows half of the apron being reconstructed in 1 year, but it would have to be done in phases just to allow tenants to get around. The only thing I see that is a problem is funding. To get over $3 million in 1 year for a GEA airport is really tough to do. But, when we go there, if you've got the appetite for the matching funds, it's worth mentioning. Because who knows, they might have the funds. If they do, let's take them.
Well, you bring up the right question, which is, and would we have the funds to go with them, even if we can get them to have the funds?
Right.
There may be some economies of scale that could be pitched, by combining them into a phase 1, phase 2 in one summer. Again, if that's possible from a time span, and if we think we might be able to get the dollars. I just throw it out there since we're talking about this overall discussion of shifting things around, and that might be one other thing to look at.
Yeah, I think that one's worth mentioning, not necessarily presenting to them. Just because of the dollar amount, that's really tough to swallow. They only have not a large amount of money to go around to the GA airports in Nevada, and Carson City gets the majority of it every year. I think that's why we didn't get the design this year.
This would be something that when we go have our annual get-together, as we did last year with the FAA, we can float the trial balloon of saying, we do have adequate funding in our budget to accept additional, matching funds money, and if that were to become available, we would be ready to move forward on. So if they want to move it up, and then that gives us the opportunity to then redo the ACIP at that point. So I guess I'm reading that your recommendation is we leave it as is, and then when we sit down with them just say, we'd be ready to match further if you guys felt
Yeah.
that you had a desire.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because that north apron design that I'm pitching for 2015, that's the entire north apron. And then during that design, we'll figure out the best way to phase it to make it really work. So here's the way I see it then, is in 2016, we show phase one. 2017, we show phase two and the airport master plan update. In 2018, we show taxiway alpha and delta pavement seal and stripe. In 2019, we show the rehab of the perimeter road. And then I'll move, well, I'll just leave 2020 as is.
Could I suggest that in 2019, that we also, since we're doing pavement resealing, which isn't going to be a huge dollar number, maybe we move the gates up from 20 to 19 as a requested item, particularly since the folks in Phoenix seem a little more excited about security than the San Fran folks were.
Yeah. We can do that. Notice that the project number 9 is also has to do with the fencing. So maybe we combine the two, make it one big perimeter fencing and gate project.
Will we have generated enough money in the gate fund to get the matching at that point?
I believe so, yes.
For both projects, Tim?
I don't know about both, but by then, yes, I think we can do it.
I don't know. I mean, we could leave them separate, but maybe I ought to shift that to be number 7 and not number 9.
Well, basically, they would be separate projects being done at the same time, based on our conversation when we created the gate fund, that gate fund is for gates, not fences.
Okay. Yeah, that project number 6 is to replace all the automatic gates with aluminum cantilever gates, and we need to modify the adjacent fence to make those things operate properly. But then that project number 9, what I'll do is I'll change that to project number 7 and just shift the rest on down.
Just so they show up next to each other?
Yeah, correct. I think that'd be a good way to present it.
To be clear, would you be suggesting, we were talking about moving project 6 about gates to 19.
Okay.
Would we
yeah.
be talking about 6 and 9 going to 19?
Maybe we ought to just, no, we'll go ahead and move 6 up into 19, but I'll make the chain link fence project as number 7.
Could I ask, since 2020 is basically a wish list anyway,
Yeah.
several years ago, back during the last master planning process, there was discussion of the airport's desire to gain additional land around the airport as it became available, if it became available. It was always a goal of the airport just to prevent encroachment and things like that. Is there any federal money available for acquisition of land to prevent encroachment and/or runway clear space, taxiway clear space, that sort of thing?
I think that's worth putting on the list. Now, I recall last year at San Francisco, or actually the last year that we went to San Francisco, they were saying that particular year that there isn't a lot of funds for buying land. Okay, but they haven't changed the AIP handbook, and that AIP handbook says that adjacent lands are available for funding.
Well, then maybe we ought to put down in 2020 a wish list to acquire adjacent properties to the airport that are becoming available and/or, whatever verbiage
Yeah.
we have to add to that, but I think it'd certainly be worth including at that point in time.
I agree. Because we talk about every project, at least we can present it to them, let them know what you have in mind. I do need to know an acreage in the enterprise. Do you have any idea?
I don't know, 10 acres, 20 acres? What?
I was going to suggest 20 acres and $5 million.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I don't know what's available, but if there's anything available, we ought to ask the FAA for money to acquire it.
I have one other suggestion, which is in moving things up, if we can try and make sure that we have the funding that we're asking for a little bit more uniform, so we don't have a big drop in funding from year to year, because I know that when they're doing their programming, or at least Abel told us at one point, when they're doing their programming, they look at the prior year. So if we have a really low year, it's going to be hard to catch up. So if in 2017 we've got Phase 2 of the North Apron and the Airport Master Plan, we probably should have both the taxiway, Alpha and Delta pavement seal and stripe, and the rehabilitate perimeter road moved up to 2018, and then in 2019 have both the gates and the fence moved in there. And my thinking is you end up with a little bit more of the same kind of magnitude of dollars that you're asking for each year, and I think it's easier for the FAA to program those amounts, because if we kind of more of a roller coaster, I think we might be hurting our ability to get funds. That's just my suggestion.
I'd concur. I think that's very worthwhile suggestion, because that was, I recall during our last discussion with the FAA that there was this general tone of, if you're consistent with what you're asking for, that makes life easier for them. So I think that probably is. I've forgotten that, but thank you for bringing that back up again.
I would like to, Jim, real quick, with Mike Williams visiting the airport and some of the other folks from Phoenix ADO, we've toured, given tours around the airport. I think when we go in November to Phoenix to have our meeting with them, it'd be a good idea to have Brian Fitzgerald take really good close-up pictures of the pavement on the northwest ramp. That way, it may sway them to help us out in getting that funded, as did the San Francisco ADO when they saw the shape of our south ramp.
If I might ask a question about timing of monies around the master plan, because I haven't been through one myself. When you look at the budget year for the master plan update, the $300,000 as proposed, which I imagine, the real expenditure there is working with the airport master planning consultants to do their work. Is there anything that we should be thinking about, for someone new to this process, the timing of what we do as a group before that, where that money gets spent in terms of, is it sort of over the course of a year? Because I know that this process can take some time, as Guy was educating me. And I was just kind of wondering where the monies show up in the course of that.
I could, having been around in the audience for the last round of this thing, when we did all of the stuff that's in here now, that process went on, as I recall it, for almost a year, with numerous public hearings, major presentations by the designers, because that was the one where we were turning the runway. We were redoing taxiways. We were reconfiguring the airport. It was pretty, and then there was the question of acquiring the hill so that we could remove it as an obstruction so we could get an instrument approach. There were numerous things there, and there was a lot of public input. I remember going to months' worth of meetings, and as I recall, there were several public input workshops in addition to the public hearing process that we go through every month. So the process is quite extensive and goes out over a period of time. I don't know how, not having been on the board at that time, I don't know how the money laid out, but I know that the consultants were here. I remember 4 specific times that they were here, so that probably spread out over 9 to 12 months. So I would guess that money's probably, if you just divided it out in thirds, it's probably going to be 1/3 per quarter over 9 months of the year. Am I remembering that reasonably correctly?
I actually think the master plan might have lasted longer than a year. But as far as the cost of that, yeah, it'd be evenly spread out during that duration.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back, there was a data collection period where they came out and they held both workshops and plenty of meetings and collected a lot of data and tried to look at what we thought the future of the airport was and what they thought the future of the airport could be. And then there was a time period where they came up with a bunch of options. Unfortunately, the options went to the newspaper before they came to us, and one of them was a little bit incendiary with respect to the neighbors. And so we had to wrestle with that issue. And then once we got those options, we had additional hearings and meetings, and then we finally fine-tuned it down to something we could adopt. And I think it was more than a year. I'm sure I could go back and look and find out, but that's a really good thought. We should be thinking about the time planning and what, if anything, we can do in advance to collect that information and get the consultant up and running as quickly as possible.
We've made a number of changes. Do we have clarity there in your mind, on what we're adding to the ACIP?
Yeah, let me repeat it and see if I got it right. Okay, so...
Do you have it tomorrow? Do you have the changes?
No.
Okay.
But I have it on record.
In 2015, we're going to submit a grant application to get funding for the design of the North Apron reconstruction. In 2016, we show the first phase of construction for the North Apron. In 2017, we show the second and final phase of reconstruction of the North Apron, and a second project in 2017 being the Airport Master Plan update. In 2018, we show projects 4 and 5, one being the seal coat and striping of both parallel taxiways, the other project being the rehabilitation of the perimeter road. In 2019, we'll show 2 separate projects. One is to replace the automatic gates, and the second one is to replace any wire fencing along the perimeter with chain link fencing. And then in 2020, we will show the first priority project to be land acquisition of 20 acres at $5 million, and then the remaining projects will just be listed. I'm assuming that we still have an appetite for snow removal equipment storage building? Okay. And then the emergency generator, I don't know how important that is, but the dollar amount isn't that great, so there's no reason not to leave it in, but it's not a very high priority. And then the hangar road taxi lanes with utilities, that's extremely unlikely, but it's fundable. So there's no reason not to put it in.
Any other questions for Jim?
I noticed that the airport master plan update and rehabilitation of the perimeter road come out to the same dollars. How did we come to that?
I've got detailed estimates for the construction projects. The airport master plan, I don't know the actual cost. What I did was I queried our planning group from back east, what their typical charge was for an airport master plan update for an airport of this size, and that's what they told me. But I don't know what the actual fee would be. I would hope that it's less than that because, but the last master plan update, I think it was in the range of 200 to 250,000, and that was quite a while ago. So I wouldn't be surprised at this fee.
I was actually going to suggest, since I remembered that number also, that since 10 years have gone by, maybe you want to bump that a little, because we're talking about 3 years out from here. And with inflation rearing its ugly head, I fully expect that that number might be a little bit bigger.
Yeah, you know, I might even ask Kaufman for an idea.
The last one was a full master plan, where this is going to be an update, so.
Well, no, they're always called that.
Oh, okay.
They're always called an airport master plan update. I don't know why.
And in this one, we might be talking about how the center triangle could be laid out to facilitate either business development and or other airport infrastructure development, which that kind of planning is probably as complex as the planning associated with the 3-degree shift in the runway.
So I think Jim is asking for a motion to approve the ACIP as modified by the discussion here tonight.
I move that we accept the CIP with the modifications that Jim listed.
Just for the record, can I ask if there's any public comment? Seeing none, back to the board for further discussion or a motion.
I move that we accept the CIP with the changes that Jim Clegg has mentioned.
We have a motion. Any further discussion? If not, a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, if there be any? The motion carries unanimously. Item 3, discussion and possible action to develop sorry, I haven't got my glasses here. Discussion and possible action to develop short-term strategic planning for the Carson City Airport and coordinate those plans with the Carson City Board of Supervisors. Mr. White?
Did you get that list of suggestions I made from last month? If you didn't, I have another copy here. I did read that advisory circular that Jim Clegg sent around in regards to how to build a master plan. I don't know if the rest of you guys did, but I have quite a few questions on that. And rather than sit here all night talking about things that aren't going to help us tomorrow, I'll go ahead and get those questions to staff, and then they can just get the answers back to all of us at that point. I reached out to Mark Amadei's office in regards to the suggestion I had about getting relief from the FAA, allowing us to designate properties to not be suitable for aviation use and be able to get those under some other purview. He indicated his man in the office would get back to us. I just wanted to get clarification in how we do that, whether that is a legislative thing he needs to take care of, or if it's an administrative thing he can work with the FAA to do. And that's about it that I have done in the last month.
Could I just ask on that last item, what kind of change in land use are you requesting, just so that I can help you with that maybe?
Well, last month we talked about being able to change lease language and do things outside of the AIP restrictions, specifically some of that frontage property along College Park, so that we can get projects in there that may not necessarily fit under the current restrictions. So that was something we talked about exploring.
I guess I need to understand which restrictions we're talking about. The AIP, there's two AIPs, that's part of the problem maybe, is that we have an air industrial park, which is a city zoning requirement, and then we have the airport's improvement program, which is the FAA funding.
The FAA Airport Improvement Program,
and
right.
so you want to know if there's a way that we can change the AIP requirements so that we can do something with that land other
Right.
than what we're doing right now.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we can get out from underneath that restriction of being strictly aviation use. And I realize we don't want to go clear off out in left field with this, but to get some relief, because we've had a few people that weren't real comfortable with, I think the Cactus Airport, that was one of the things that they didn't care for either, or the Cactus Museum. Let's see if we can move some of these properties into being used instead of vacant by giving ourselves some room to operate.
Are you talking about inside the fence or outside the fence?
Both, actually.
Inside the fence is strictly aviation, but outside the fence, I don't think that you're going to run into a restriction like that. There's uses outside the fence on airport property that are appropriate. You just don't want to put like a hospital or
right.
Things like that. That's what the FAA is concerned about. But they allow non-aeronautical uses outside the fence.
For example, there was an insurance company that was using some of the space on El Aero that was outside of the fence.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfectly okay. If a gas station wanted to locate, even though they're not selling gas to airplanes, they're selling gas to cars, that would be a compatible use. So from the FAA standpoint on AIP funding, as long as it's a compatible use that's outside the fence, that should be okay. So I don't know that there's any restriction there on what we can do. I think the biggest problem here is just finding those people and those uses so we can get the economic development going. That's really the challenge. But there's, I guess I'm not hearing any changes to the current AIP structure that need to be changed to do that. And there might be some, I'm just not hearing it, so that might be something you and I can talk about offline or something.
That'll work.
As I recall, back in about, might have been 06, 07, somewhere back there, getting old, I can't remember all that stuff anymore, but there was a discussion of putting a 7-Eleven out there right in front of that chunk of land that we were talking about for Cactus, and for a variety of reasons, most of which were that we didn't think a 7-Eleven was going to be the best use. We were hoping that maybe we'd get an airport-type restaurant that would come in there, and I think it was turned down for that reason, plus the fact that we thought eventually there could be something like a museum or an aviation-related business that might find that, or aviation community-related business. But it was possible, and the board, I recall, considered that, but then turned it down itself rather than, and when it's not a function of the fact that there was a restriction. It was just that it was deemed by that board at that time that that wasn't the highest and best use of that piece of property for the airport.
That's my recollection as well. In terms of looking for a compatible use, I think the logical place to look is to look at the growth areas in aviation. And that may be unmanned aircraft. it might be light sport, it might be some of the areas in aviation that have kind of evolved over the last couple of years and are currently just on the cutting edge. May have something to do with, electric cars, I don't know. But whatever the latest edge is, that would be, the kind of the ideal tenant for that area. That's just my thought.
Could you add that to your list of questions so that, because what I'll do is you said you had several questions, and when I get those, we'll pass them on to Kaufman and get some definitive answers for you.
Additionally, I'm wondering if now is an appropriate time to start communicating with the tenants on the airport and perhaps create a survey to put out to them and start getting some of their ideas and compiling what their thoughts are in regards to what do the tenants on the airport see the airport being in the future, what do they see as good and bad influences on the airport, both inside and outside the fence, and asking them what sort of efforts they can make to help the airport move along in some manner that they're able to do. Is that something that, are we premature on that? I know, the master plan is still a few years out, but I think if we compiled some pre-thoughts at this point, it might help us figure out what ladder to start climbing when it's time.
I don't see a problem with doing that, except that I think based on being a tenant and having these kinds of discussions on a regular basis around the airport with the other tenants, the ideas are so far-flung that I don't know that they would provide us with direction. I think a lot of them have actually been mentioned during that couple of months back when we were talking about ways to look upon the center triangle as a developmental possibility. We got all kinds of input and ideas. Most of them are very far-flung and not things that are going to give us direction yet. I think what we need to know as part of the planning process, and perhaps this is an item for discussion with the FAA when our designated group goes down to meet with them, perhaps we could ask at that point, because a big piece of this is what's fundable and what's not. When you develop a master plan and airport development programs, frankly, when we're paying whatever it is, 8 or 9 cents on the dollar, that's what we're going to go for. We're not going to spend money doing something where we actually have to pay out. I mean, unless it's literally we have to fix something that broke. But I think we should, before we starting the discussion with the tenants, I think we should have a pretty good idea of what you can and can't get. And then with the categories, that might make for a very meaningful survey. If we could give the tenants, here are 10 categories of fundable activity that we could include in our master plan. Please give us any idea you have that fits under any one of those 10 criteria. And I think that might be the most productive way to utilize tenant input. And I would think we could probably maybe begin that process perhaps next spring. Nobody pays any attention to anything in the winter, and we're not going to get any input from the FAA until November.
Okay.
I think that's a good suggestion. I'm trying to tie this back to the item that we're noticed for and having some challenges there. Was there anything else with respect to short-term strategic planning and coordination with the Board of Supervisors in this item?
Not at this time.
Okay, great.
This item, then, I take it requires no further action.
Right.
Okay. Does anybody have any other comments or questions for Morris or staff on this matter? Okay. Go ahead, Carl.
Maybe just briefly. Yeah, in that conversation, there was reference to the Air Industrial Park zoning, to be clear on what I mean when I say AIP, as well as reference to, or in conjunction with that, properties along College Parkway. Does the Air Industrial Park zone actually extend that far south, to the south side of the airport? I thought it was all on the north side.
I think you're correct. I think it's all on the north side. I haven't looked at a map recently.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Okay, I just, that was the kind of thing that was like tickled my head here a little.
Okay, if there are no further comments, then we'll move to item 4. And that is discussion and possible action to support the modification of NRS 844, Section 4, Paragraph 3, to allow members to extend their terms of the Carson City Airport Authority. Mr. White.
So actually, my intentions aren't to try to extend the terms beyond the 4 years, but to remove the clause in 844 that requires you to have a 4-year set-out period in between your terms. I feel like with the lack of willing participants, if we get somebody on this board that's willing to work, I think 3 terms altogether, making up the 12-year term limit that the Board of Supervisors has imposed in their policies, would be very conducive to creating that continuity so that the projects move forward in a relatively smooth manner rather than trying to have a whole new set of people, very frequently.
I have a comment on that, and I guess I'm going to take exactly the opposite position. Philosophically, and for reasons that I'll get to secondly, I am adamantly opposed to anything that eliminates term limits in any governmental body. I would take the opposite point of view and say that the city, its boards, and everyone else should take a lesson from the airport authority and have a clause in their policies that states nobody can serve second terms or consecutive terms or to build the kind of gridlock that we've got going on in Washington right now. The problem being that people get there and stay there forever. I think the idea that people come, work for 4 years to get things done, and then someone replaces them, I think that's a wonderful idea. Recruiting candidates, I think that's probably it's always been difficult, but there are people around who will do it if approached, and if approached in a timely fashion. We also have our board structured so there's never a massive changeover. The idea of having someone serve continuously on the board, I think, is also a mistake because you tend to get to inbred thinking or just tunnel vision over a period of time. I think the idea of adding new people with new thoughts is highly productive and highly beneficial. I think a few things have happened in the last 4 years or 3 years that I've been on the board because other people bring new ideas in each time, including the ideas that you've brought up yourself. But if we don't continually refresh the garden, we're just going to simply keep getting the same thing over and over again. I think it's very, very important. But again, philosophically, I think term limits, or the absence of term limits, are a major failing in our political system, and numerous political scientists have written on that topic. We have a board where we do have term limits, and I think they're a wonderful idea. With that, I'll end my diatribe. Anybody else care to comment?
Just like to add something. Anytime we make a legislative change, it costs money. The last legislative change we made was to provide for appointment of a member to represent the public if we couldn't find 2 manufacturers. In fact, I think you're the appointee for that. And even though that was completely uncontested, just walking that through the legislature, which is not just walking it through the legislature, it requires a lot of work. I think that ended up costing around $20,000 in legal fees. I remember seeing my own bill and I was embarrassed by it. But that's the amount of time and energy it takes to make a legislative change, even where there is no controversy. And so I think you want to kind of factor that into your thinking too, which is what does it cost to make a change to the statute?
Yeah, Steve mentioned in his legal brief earlier about Bob Thomas wanting it to be that way so that we would avoid having the perception of an old boys network. And I think that's, that's a pretty good thought. It would be very easy for this board to become considered that and end up with a lot of eventually hostility against it, or from the general community, maybe even the airport community. But if we keep flushing people through and recycling the people that are in it, I don't think they would have that complaint.
Carl?
Well, I was interested, having seen this on the agenda, to now understand, Member White, what I think I've got correctly your driving force in bringing this up was, which is what happens if we can't find enough good folks to serve. And I think that I'd rather approach this from my standpoint of looking at the root cause of that problem if it presents itself and say, what do we need to do to redouble our outreach, maybe in anticipation of someone's term limit coming up, and be very intentional in how do we start identifying, recruiting, grooming, soliciting interest in joining our board. That to me feels like the most important thing versus preserving the opportunity for folks to stay on for many of the reasons that have been mentioned here. I guess this is at its heart a political question, and it comes down to people's views on term limits. I think that from a standpoint of getting fresh blood, managing perception, and also allowing people a little time to kind of rejuvenate and come back at it with fresh energy. If it was 2 years, you'd say that may not have the kind of continuity you need to see projects through. 4 years, 4 years is a good run. I can tell you by the end of 4 years, even I might find myself going, I could use a little break.
As coming up at the end of my third now, I can tell you that with the amount of time and effort it takes, I'm not certain I'd want to go a second round. And I think if you look historically, there's only a few people that actually have come back. Harlan Norvell, our last chairman, served 2 terms, but he took 4 off and came back and brought new ideas back in. I think you need to step away from this. It's really easy, I see, even from my own perspective on a day-to-day basis, being a tenant of the airport and a pilot and a flyer, that you get one set of ideas, and when you get involved with the board, there's a lot of input you get from the board that causes you to rethink things, and your global vision shrinks as part of, as almost by definition, being a board member. And I think stepping away and becoming global again can help with getting the kind of strategic thinking that you've referenced in your other item tonight. And I think it's a very good idea to be bringing fresh people in. To Vice Chairman Hutter's point, yes, our outreach, I think, is one of the problems. From my own experience, the person that provides the biggest amount of outreach here is Steve Takis. He's always trying to find people that would be worthwhile and helpful. I think all of us could be doing the same thing. I think the airport manager can be talking up the whole authority process, the upcoming Tenant Appreciation Day. That's all going to be people in the airport. It's going to be the airport FBO folks, the manufacturers. All those folks are going to be there. Maybe it's talk about, when you run into people, say, why don't you think about a position on the authority at some point? We get a list of people that would be good to work on this. I think outreach is our own fault, because again, we get in here, we get doing our thing, and we forget about the fact that it has to go on after we leave.
Well, I think I pretty well understand that I don't have a popular idea here. Based on that, should we then turn our attention to the fact that the city policy exempts the city representative from that 4-year set out. Allows the city representative to sit for 12 straight years. If you look at page 6 of the board's, commissions, and committees policy, term limits, where'd that go? It does specifically exempt the city representative. I didn't think we'd go here, so I didn't highlight it, so now I have to find it.
Right, it does. I'll just tell you,
Okay.
the statute in 844 does exempt the city representative from the 4-year term limitation. And the reason that was done is because the city, typically the supervisors get elected on a certain schedule. Our schedule for appointments is October 1st of different straddled years, and it never matches up to the election cycle for supervisors. And so one of the things we did is we said, okay, that thing is complicating our ability to have a city representative. And so that change was made, at Bob Thomas's suggestion when he was still alive, to accommodate the city's election cycles. And so you're right, there is an exception for the city representative. But I don't think we've ever had a city representative that served over 4 years. We've had city representatives, no question about it, who have served in their role on the Board of Supervisors or elsewhere for over 4 years, but they've always rotated on different boards and commissions. We've never had anybody who's really been there for a long term.
I seem to recall that we have had city representatives that change midterm. As I recall, I think it was back when Ray Maseko was mayor. He had the position for a while, and then he stepped down, and I forget who he appointed after, but he didn't serve the full 4-year term. The city's position is kind of whoever the city wants, they put them on the board at that point, and the terms seem to change pretty, it's not one that the board or we have any input on at all. The city is the one that makes that call, and they do change. As Steve has pointed out, I've never seen anybody be here for any longer than 4 years. In a couple of cases, in my 15 years around here, I've seen them change more frequently than that. So I don't know that, again, as Steve points out, that's a pretty expensive proposition to go make an administrative change that is kind of one of those, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, that's my thought anyway.
Okay. So it dies. I'm good.
Any further comments on that item? No action needs to be taken. The item is closed. Actually, I should, for the record, is there any public input on that discussion? Seeing none, the item is closed. Airport engineers report.
Yeah, the only thing I have left in my engineer's report is at the end, I just summarize how much money's been spent on each AIP project that we have. So any questions on that? Other than that, I don't have anything further.
Any questions for Jim from the board? Okay, public comment, not seeing any. Airport managers report.
Okay, as we talked about earlier, the runway is undergoing its rehabilitation. We blockaded taxiways to eliminate someone not checking NOTAMs and wandering onto the runway for a takeoff. We've erected the lighted signs that create the lighted X to let people know that the runway is closed. NOTAMs have been set. The AWAS is transmitting with the notation that the runway is closed. We really have had no problems. One guy did wander out, saw the blockades, called me, and he didn't check NOTAMs, but outside of that, it went very smoothly. Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., we will start the process of putting down the GSB 88, and it will take approximately 24 hours to cure, but they will have it, we're looking forward to having the striping completed by 5 p.m. Friday. If it does happen before that, I'll lift the restrictions. We'll clear the runway so that people can land or take off. We've been playing musical airplanes for the last couple of days to get the ramp done. Like Jim said, Phase 1 and 2A are completed. We played musical aircraft again, and now Phase 2B and Phase 3 are ready to go. So we should have everything completed, we're hoping by, well, just to keep it simple, end of day tomorrow on the apron, and it'll be finished. We're going to start marking numbers on the tie downs at the first opportunity. Gary and I have devised a program to consecutively number each tie down, but we're not going to break. We're just going to number all the tie downs consecutively, just to keep it simple. And then we might, and we're thinking about it, naming the tie downs as to who is leasing those tie downs. Just not sure that I'm going to do that yet. But we can talk about that. That's a discussion piece. And as we've put out, we're having a tenant appreciation barbecue on October 2nd between 5 and 7 p.m. We are going to have the Chamber of Commerce are going to have a mixer also. Food is going to be provided by Carson Barbecue, and the Mayor Crowell, will be there to cut the ribbon. So I encourage anybody, any tenants and members of the Chamber and the Board to please come, and please RSVP to let me know. We need to find out how many people so we'll have enough food for everyone.
Excuse me, Tim, what day is that again?
That's October 2nd, Thursday, between 5 and 7 p.m.
Tim, could I ask one question on the musical aircraft? I've noticed the growing weeds, and by weeds I mean piles of apparently derelict aircraft building up along the side of Bravo there. Are those people who are just moving around because of the paving, or is that something else?
Those are abandoned aircraft. The Albatrosses are not. The Albatrosses, we received leases, and to be honest with you, we just haven't got to those to take care of the weeds yet. We've just been so busy with other things.
By weeds, I meant growing derelict aircraft. I wasn't referring to the flora and fauna over there. I noticed there's one of the S2Fs over there. Is that there temporarily, or is that permanently there?
Cactus Air Force asked if they could move both S2s over there with their Albatross. We are receiving a monthly lease payment for those aircraft. The two small aircraft, I think there may be three now, those are derelict and abandoned, and we are going to move on those probably pretty soon. Letters have been sent out. We've been unable to reach the owners. Liens have been placed on those aircraft by Sterling Air, and we have to talk with Steve Lewis to see how we're going to approach this, because the money's really owed to him. And I don't know, we'll have to talk to Steve Takis about how we proceed, and we'll talk after the meeting. And we'll bring it up as an agenda item next month. And that's really all I have for now. I was going to give a report on the money spent and what we have, but it's pretty complete what Jim has on the last page of his briefing.
Guy, in order to alleviate any further confusion about how you describe the aircraft, some airports, like Miami, for instance, refer to those kind of areas as Cockroach Corner. It might be appropriate for us too, except for the Albatrosses.
Well, we don't want to move the Albatrosses. We'll deprive the pigeons of homes.
Jim, you have a comment on that?
I just have a comment on the completion of the apron and the runway. That's all weather dependent. I heard that it might rain. It's got a small chance of rain. But if it rains, it's going to delay everything by a full day. And that'll end up running into the weekend to complete.
I refuse to allow it to rain.
Everyone around here would really like to see some rain. All we've seen is smoke from the fires burning on the other side of the mountain. So there are large clouds in the sky, but they appear to turn very bright red at night, indicating that they're smoke. So I'm kind of with Tim. I don't think we're going to see a lot of rain, but we do understand, and that's a well-made comment, that there could be a delay if Mother Nature decides to help dispense with the drought. Any other comments for Tim on the manager's report? Okay, I guess in the past, Tim, we've asked about a financial report, how we were doing against budget, and since Steve isn't here and you have the budget numbers, I guess you're doing his budget, or, okay. So we'll call that treasurer's report now. And Tim, you're going to take care of that?
Yes. Checking and savings in the money market, we have $469,193.67. In checking, $10,710.71. And building and maintenance account, $57,775.81. Now, a note on that, some of that may come out into checking to help cover some of the matching costs. We're going to look at the budget as we go, but we've got a couple of very large bills to pay. For instance, on AIP 27 Phase 3, we have a bill of $537,057. We're awaiting drawdown before the check is written. On AIP 26 Phase 2, we're awaiting $141,146 to pay construction costs. And Phase 1 is minor, but it's $2,688. And no checks will be written until we get the drawdowns in the bank. But for the matching funds, we are probably going to be pulling some out of the building and maintenance account because that's what it's there for. I was putting money into that strictly from rock sales. Going on to trying to find rock sales in here, which I'll find here in a bit. Well, we received another $3,200 in rock sales for last month, so slowly creeping up. They're starting to sell more rock, and I noticed equipment working out there today, so that means that they are moving rock. Total checking and savings, $569,680.81, with total assets of $678,163.34. Looking at the budget versus actual, our total expense is approximately 12.6%. That's a little less than budget, but as I stated earlier, there was a little problem, and it's probably my fault, for the way I expensed the personal property tax income we received from the city. I'm going to work with Beth to correct that, and that number should be actually about 17%, and that would be normal. Total other expense, 26.7, we're within budget. Net income, 14.7%, which is, my understanding, not too bad. So, all in all, our budget versus actual, we're within budget on expenses and income. And so that's my report on the financials. Any questions?
Any questions for Tim? This budget that we have in front of us, I saw there was that spate of emails went back and forth about a week ago, and that's what you're referring to as the corrected items we have before us now?
That's correct. The way it was explained to me to generate the report was a different method than I thought it was. I received the information from an associate at Cone Company, and we worked it out. This is the way it was generated, and it's a lot more easily explained. So.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, that completes the treasurer's report. I skipped over legal counsel. So, Steve, I just did it for expediency here, so we didn't have to jump around twice.
That's fine. I just have a couple of quick items. One, the first item I had on here was with regard to the special session. There were several attempts during the special legislative session to bring other issues into the singular issue that was the special session was called for, which was basically to put the tax incentives in place so that Tesla could locate their facility here. But all of those efforts to place other issues failed. The governor stuck to his guns, and all in all, I think they accomplished what they had hoped to accomplish. From our standpoint, I think we should be looking at Tesla for opportunities. We are an airport and we are a city that's within the sphere of people that the 6,500 jobs are expected to come from. I expect there should be a good deal of economic activity that goes on between the construction of the Gigafactory and its operation after it's constructed, and areas like Carson City. I know that the mayor was interviewed by CNBC, and a friend of mine called me from Washington, D.C. to tell me, hey, I just saw the mayor of Carson City on national news talking about the Tesla thing. Interestingly enough, they interviewed him right outside the Capitol when they made the announcement, and they didn't interview anybody else. They didn't interview anybody from Tesla. They didn't interview anybody from the governor's office. They interviewed Carson City's representative. So I think that bodes well for at least the financial community, seeing that there'll be a boon to us. I think we should look for what opportunities there are. Certainly, the Reno-Tahoe Airport is the large airport that would be used for, I think, shipping facilities and shipping equipment in, more so than us. And then at the south terminus of that USA Parkway is Silver Springs Airport, which I think is ideally suited to capitalize on growth from Tesla, particularly if NDOT or the state follows through and accelerates the paving of USA Parkway so that it's paved all the way through. But I think there's got to be opportunities for us too, and I would just suggest that you all kind of keep really open mind to that and look for those opportunities for the Carson City Airport. The second item is a report on the Aviation Trust Fund status, and there's really nothing to report there. Tim and I are going to be involved in an executive committee conference call, I believe next week, to talk about how we help try and get funding into that account at the next legislative session, which is an activity that has been picked up by the Nevada Airports Association. They're actually leading the charge there. Legislative calendar and recommendations. There's one piece of legislation that we expect to see at the next legislative session, and it's the one that you approved writing a letter in support of, one of the two letters that you approved at the last meeting, which is a tax abatement for aviation parts to put Nevada on the same competitive footing as the surrounding states are. They all have reduced taxes or no taxes on aircraft parts, and as a result, people who have their large airplanes worked on don't have them worked on in Nevada. They send them other places. We expect that legislation to come back. Obviously, we are supporting that per your action last week, and that's one of the things that should not involve a lot of time or expense or anything by us in the legislative session, but we do want to keep tabs on it and make sure that it doesn't morph into something that doesn't help us, that hurts us, which it shouldn't, but you always worry about that with legislation. It can take some strange turns. The last thing I just want to brief you on is tomorrow morning at the Board of Supervisors meeting is approval of the Wickersham lease addendum that you approved either last month or the month before. I can't remember now. I guess it was last month. And so that item's on the agenda. I don't have anything else, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm done.
Questions for Steve? Okay, Steve, I guess you're done. Okay, we'll move on to report from authority members. Does anybody have anything? Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It, I think, seems to be the appropriate place to do this, and, it always is a sad day on the airport when we lose one of our tenants and friends and fellow pilots, and, I'm sad to have to acknowledge one of those. And I don't know if board members here knew Keith Sulprizio, but Keith Sulprizio was a longtime member of our community here in Carson City, and an avid aviator. He flew a T6 and one of the CBs, beautiful CB, that he flew out of Carson here. And in addition to being our next door neighbor growing up when I was a little guy here in Carson, and very good friends with his daughters and his family, Keith also was the president of United Engine, a automotive both OEM and aftermarket piston manufacturer in the Air Industrial Park. And he led that company that his grandfather started for many, many years. And Keith passed away on, I guess it was almost a month ago, on August 15th, due to complications following surgery for a horse riding and horse roping accident that happened up in Reno. I think the horse tripped in the lasso or thereabouts and ended up pitching him off and stepping on him. And things didn't go well from there, and he unfortunately spent a good bit of time in intensive care at Carson Tahoe. But I just wanted to make mention of that, there was a very nice service, or I should say a memorial for Keith up at Lightning W a couple weekends ago, and he's certainly going to be missed. Very, very strong contributor to the Carson community, both as a pilot and as a manufacturer, and he leaves behind a lot of great memories and great family, and we're going to certainly miss Keith. So appreciate your taking a moment to just think about Keith and what he contributed to Carson City and our airport. Thanks.
Thank you, Carl. I had just heard about that myself last night. That's tragic. Okay, public comment. Any members of the public wishing to address the authority? Seeing none. Agenda items for the next regular meeting. I think we can probably, do you have anything, Jim, that you need to add?
Yeah, I think that we ought to continue with the item 1. I think we should continue with item 1, just in case there's anything to report. If hopefully, I'll just give you a final financial summary for the project.
Anything else anybody has right now? If not, anything else anyone has right now? If there isn't anything specific, please make sure Tim gets it prior to the notice period, which is in about 3 weeks. Okay. I guess that leads us to our final item, which is action on adjournment. We stand in need of a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
We have a motion.
I second.
We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? I guess we're adjourned.